What if Wonder Woman wasn't raised by the Amazons at all? What if her childhood wasn't shaped by honor and tradition, but by Circe, a witch, in a world closer to hell than paradise? Hey everyone, welcome back to Panelix. In Absolute Wonder Woman 2024, DC completely rewrites Diana's origin. This is The Last Amazon, a story where Themyscira has already fallen, the Amazons are gone, and Diana grows up far from the sisterhood that once defined her. Raised by Circe, surrounded by manipulation, magic, and survival, Diana doesn't enter man's world as a symbol of hope. She arrives as something far more dangerous, feared by governments, hunted by power, and shaped by loss. This Wonder Woman doesn't ask for peace. She challenges the world that destroyed her people. As part of DC's Absolute Universe, this series stands alongside darker reimaginings of Batman and Superman. Stories that strip away legacy and rebuild icons from their most brutal truths. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about reinvention. Because The Last Amazon doesn't just change where Wonder Woman comes from, it changes who she becomes. And it forces us to ask whether a hero born from ruin can ever believe in saving the world. In Gateway City. The coastline of Gateway City looked calm without any disturbances, until one day a very loud animal scream was heard. Meanwhile, in one of the apartments in the building facing the coast, a news reporter named Alan was ducking down with his coworker, who was carrying a camera. Alan asked if the thing was still out there and told his friend to record it first because he had a camera. Then his colleague called Alan a coward, but Alan didn't care. Finally, his friend used his camera to film, only to see that there was an inverted pyramid-shaped land surface floating above the coast. This situation was broadcast live on TV with Alan as a reporter, explaining that there was a flying object on the coast and police and military forces were evacuating residents because of it. But Alan's attention was distracted by the screams of his colleague who was filming the object behind Alan. It turned out that something flew out of the flying object earlier. The red flying animal screeched loudly and attacked the citizens on the streets and damaged the shop. But there was a figure in armor who flew over the animal that was seen on the bones without flesh and skin. After which, the person took out a rectangular sword from the small bag that gave off a green aura. The person used the sword to cut down some of the red animals that were attacking the citizens, but then the red animal named Harbinger made a screeching sound that made the Pegasus that the figure was riding fall down. The person jumped down from the back of the Pegasus, then cut down some Harbinger and carried the sword on the person's shoulders. After that, took off the face covering and revealed that the person was a woman. She put her hands in a pool of Harbinger blood, smeared it on her eyes, then she stood up and crossed her hands over her head. Next came an incantation from her mouth. A moment later, a bright light came out of her hand that stopped the Harbinger's movement. The woman turned out to be a princess from hell named Diana, or later known as Wonder Woman. Several years ago on the Wild Isle in Hell, the prison of the great sorceress Circe. Circe is seen collecting small shells on the beach. She used to lead a paradise called Ea, but now Circe is imprisoned in a dark hell alone. But then a light was seen approaching Circe, and it turned out to be Apollo carrying a baby. While floating in the air, Apollo told Circe to kneel, but Circe refused and preferred to stand. And Apollo realized that Circe was still disobedient, even though she was in hell, and he said that that was what brought her to this place. Circe confirmed Apollo's words, after which Apollo handed the baby in his hand to Circe, who confused her as to why he would put a baby in hell. Apollo immediately flew away and explained that the baby was Diana, princess of Themyscira, who was the last Amazon taken by his father Zeus as punishment for their sins against the gods. From this day on, Diana would live in hell, and Circe was her guardian, so she could never see her Amazon sisters again, who would be imprisoned forever after they finished serving Zeus. Circe was also forbidden to utter the word Amazon. From here forth, the word Amazon is banned, so I decree. Here Circe felt that Apollo seemed afraid of Diana, but she didn't know why. After that, Apollo told Circe to try saying Amazon, and when she did, all that came out of Circe's mouth was an incoherent word. Apollo left, but Circe still had time to ask what if Diana died in hell, but Apollo didn't seem to care, and Circe thought it was just a lame excuse from a sun god. After that, Circe entered her cave. She tried to hold Diana by only one leg so that her head hung down, but she kept giggling. Even when she was put on Circe's earthen bed and approached by a red snake, Circe still let her be. She thought that since Apollo hadn't explained that she had to take care of Diana, Circe would let her survive on her own. Just then, the snake opened its mouth and was about to eat Diana, but Diana easily grabbed its head and threw it away. This incident made Circe feel amazed at Diana's strength. One day, Circe was seen stirring potions in a vessel, while Diana seemed to be crawling alone behind her and met a red iguana that spouted fire at her. But Diana was fine and held the iguana's head while shaking her finger and forbidding it to spout fire again. Then she kissed the iguana's head and released it again. Circe, who saw this, said that Diana would regret her decision when the iguana burned all the hair on her body. After that, Diana grew in the cave. In the next moment, she was seen hobbling while Circe was making the potion. At other times, Circe brings in small clouds to bring down rain to bathe Diana. Sometimes Diana also plays with the animals of hell that once wanted to kill her, but now get along with her, like the red snake and the fire iguana earlier. And not just those animals, even Circe fell in love with Diana after raising her herself. She began to decorate the cave with Diana's needs, be it books, her bed. She also installed pearls that could illuminate the cave, as well as small candles. When Diana had grown into a child and could read, she was seen reading a book and then told Circe, whom she called Mother, that she didn't like it when she read about a boy who hurt a tree. Circe, who was stirring her potion, replied that it was part of their life lesson. Diana still protested why the tree didn't understand what was going on, but Circe said the tree probably knew, but it let it be. Circe then writes something on the ground with Diana next to her. Diana still feels unfair because all trees die in the end, but according to Circe, the tree does not die and only needs love to revive. Diana added that the tree also needed magic, and Circe confirmed it. Afterward, Diana fell asleep in her bed and Circe watched from a distance. The next day, Circe was braiding Diana's hair when Diana wanted to ask Circe about a word. Circe told her to name it, but Diana didn't because she wasn't sure the word really existed. Later, when Diana was a teenager, a three-headed tiger with a sting on the back of its body attacked her in a cave. Circe controlled the animal's movements using her magic, while Diana held the sting and told the animal not to be stubborn, so she wouldn't have to kill it. It was seen at another moment that Diana was already able to make potions in a vessel like Circe and cast spells on the potions. In another moment, there was a harbinger that they had managed to immobilize in the cave. Diana asked how the harbinger could be there at this time when it shouldn't have appeared, but Circe didn't know either. Circe felt that she was already in love with Diana for raising her, but to prove her love, she had to release Diana to the outside world, currently in Gateway City. Diana was seen standing near a soldier while telling Pegasus to secure the perimeter, so Pegasus flew towards the floating land. Diana asks if he's in charge here, but since the soldier is silent, she assumes that he's not and asks to see his superiors because they need to evacuate the citizens as soon as possible. The soldier thought the threat was gone, but Diana explained that the animal didn't die and was just shocked. Not to mention, there would be other harbingers coming after this. Then there was the sound of the lower end of the floating land opening, and Diana told the soldiers to leave immediately and evacuate the citizens because they had no time. The soldier nearby would argue, but Diana just told him to run. And instantly, a giant monster with a shape like the harbinger Diana had faced earlier came out of the floating land, and that monster was Harbinger Prime. Diana stood in front of the Harbinger Prime while explaining that this place was protected by her carrying the sword of Athena and told him to return to where he came from. But Harbinger Prime replied that he was sure that this place was not protected, then used his strength to push Diana away. But Diana used the sword of Athena to withstand the attack while then calling Pegasus. Pegasus sprayed flames at Harbinger Prime, but Harbinger Prime easily swung his hand so that Pegasus was thrown away. Down below, Diana stuck her sword into the ground and ran towards Harbinger Prime's feet, then held it and cast a spell on him. Unfortunately, Harbinger Prime noticed Diana's movement and used the laser beam from his eyes to attack Diana. Diana complained that she was always defeated by the laser beam, while Harbinger Prime exclaimed, "Harbingers rise! Sow chaos and prepare the way!" With his call, the Harbingers who had been paralyzed by Diana rose again, and Diana realized that the situation had become serious. The Harbinger who had risen screeched and flew to attack Diana, who used her hands to protect her face. Meanwhile, Harbinger Prime again uses his laser eyes to attack Diana while saying that he is not afraid even though Diana can bounce back from his attack. But Diana can avoid Harbinger Prime's attack. Then when Diana paused for a moment, the laser attack returned to her. Fortunately, Diana swiftly crossed her arms and used the iron on her wrist to reflect the laser attack back towards Harbinger Prime. Getting his laser attack back, Harbinger Prime was furious and said that he had warned Diana. Then he shot Diana again with a laser from his eyes, which caused Diana to be thrown away. Back to the moment before this, on the Wild Isle. Diana and Cersei are sitting by the fireplace while Cersei is reading a book. At this time, Diana intends to ask the word she wanted to know before, and Cersei allows it. Diana emphasized that this was important to her. Cersei said yes again. Then Cersei added that her daughter had no fear. But this time, Diana admitted that she was afraid. Cersei explained that she was not afraid of the word, but of the changes it would cause. Diana again asked how she knew a word without anyone teaching it to her, as if it was beating in her chest. Then Cersei told Diana to say the word so she could know who she really was. Diana said, "Amazon." They both shed tears. Then Diana asked what an Amazon was, and Cersei wanted to explain that she was an Amazon, but Cersei couldn't say the word. When Apollo brought her to this place, Apollo forbade Cersei to say the word forever. Diana was confused as to why he did it, but Cersei didn't know the answer either. The two of them stood and held each other, while Cersei explained that the Amazons had a duty to protect the world up there from the oldest monsters who wanted to devour it, and without the Amazons, the world up there would end. Unless Diana repeats the word and becomes what her destiny wants her to be, then Diana repeats the word Amazon while sobbing in Cersei's arms. Cersei again told Diana to repeat the word, and Diana repeated the word Amazon many times at that time. At this moment, Diana, who regained consciousness after being attacked by Harbinger Prime, was reminded of the memories with the mother who had raised her. She also saw in the distance Harbinger Prime attacking soldiers who were trying to use their weapons even though they was afraid of Harbinger Prime. Diana got back up and took the lasso from the small bag on her waist as she said the word Amazon. Harbinger Prime told her to step aside because she had already lost, otherwise they would return to hurt her. But Diana still said that she insisted. With the lasso in her hand, Diana continued to say, "For I am Diana of Themyscira, last of the Amazons, daughter of Cersei, princess of Hell, witch of the Wild Isle. And you will not have this world while I still draw breath." In Hell, just before letting Diana go, Cersei vowed that if she truly loved Diana, then she would give her freedom and all the weapons she needed, then watch her become whatever she was destined to be. In Gateway City now, the TV shows Diana facing off against the giant Harbinger Prime, surrounded by flying Harbingers. Alan Fox, a reporter from the Gate News, reported that a strong woman was facing a giant creature that they could only see in science fiction movies on their beach. It was shown on TV that Diana was jumping right in front of Harbinger Prime and using a rope called Nemesis to attack Harbinger Prime, while Alan commented that the world would not be the same after this. Harbinger Prime did not stay silent. He countered Diana's attack with his laser eyes, but Diana managed to avoid the attack. Diana instead uses Nemesis to scratch Harbinger Prime's face, who immediately gets burned by it. After feeling the power of Nemesis, Diana warned Harbinger Prime to retreat and save himself. But then a horde of flying Harbinger looks like it's going to attack Diana, while Harbinger Prime gives orders to destroy Diana. At this time, Diana crossed her arms over her chest and cast a spell that formed a shield of fire in the shape of a star that blocked the Harbinger horde's attack. Diana spun Nemesis to attack the Harbinger flying towards her while avoiding Harbinger Prime's laser eye attack. She also warned Harbinger Prime to retreat before facing his destruction. But Harbinger Prime even replied that retreating was the destruction for him. Diana also made Nemesis a lasso around Harbinger Prime's neck. She explained that Nemesis was a weapon forged using hellfire, made by her mother, the sorceress Circe, from the last remaining basilisk, soaked in the blood of Prometheus and blessed by Demeter, who is the goddess of agriculture and harvest. According to Diana, Nemesis would feel like hell to Harbinger Prime as it would bind and burn Harbinger Prime's sins, especially with his soul having been defiled by the innocent man's life. Hearing the sizzling sound of Nemesis burning his neck, Harbinger Prime screamed for release. But Diana explained that the pain he was suffering now was the result of his treatment of others, and this was the day of vengeance for him. Harbinger Prime again asked to be released by Diana, who he called an Amazon. Then Diana was willing to release him on several conditions, namely that Harbinger Prime leave for a millennium or two from here and tell the monsters who summoned him here that this place was protected by Diana from Wild Isle, the daughter of Hell, the last Amazon. Harbinger Prime readily agreed, and Diana released the noose, and the monsters went back into the ocean along with the inverted pyramid land that was their lair. On TV, Alan asked his friend how could the monster live in the ocean, but his friend reminded him that they were still broadcasting live, and Alan could only swear because of his carelessness. Meanwhile, on the beach, a man in a military uniform approached Diana, who was looking at the direction of Harbinger's departure. The man apparently knew Diana, because he called Diana's name when he was nearby. Diana looked surprised, and when she turned around, she recognized the man as Steve. Diana's memory goes back to the time before this, on the Wild Isle in Hell, which was the home of Diana and her mother, Circe. At that time, Diana found Steve in his army uniform, washed up unconscious on the shore of Wild Isle. Diana looked down at Steve and tried to wake him up by calling out to him and asking if he could hear her. Steve woke up briefly, and it was Diana speaking in Greek, and he just asked her to tell them he was sorry. Under the black sun, Diana casts a spell to make her language understood by Steve. She again tries to talk to him and asks where he came from. But Steve, who is back unconscious, is seen being pulled into the sea by Hydra tentacles. Diana flew and jumped into the sea to save him, and moments later Diana flew out while carrying Steve, who was soaked. After that, Diana entered her cave and asked her mother, who was stirring potions, to get her a Cerberus blanket because it was the warmest. Circe, who saw Diana carrying a man, exclaimed in surprise, "What in Hecate's name?" Diana puts Steve to bed and tells Circe that she found him on the beach. Circe asks if he was washed away, but Diana doesn't know, and only explains that their clothes were wet because Hydra tried to take Steve. Circe takes the blanket Diana is referring to and gives it to her while reminding her that Diana can't just randomly fight with Hydra, but Diana denies it because she only took Steve back. Circe can only hope that Hydra's memory is short, but Diana responds that she'll kill Hydra if it messes with her again because Steve doesn't belong to it. Circe instead asked who Steve belonged to and if it was Diana. Diana, who was covering Steve's body with a blanket, replied that he belonged to himself, but since Diana had found him, she was responsible for Steve's safety. Circe didn't fully believe Diana's reasoning, but she went to prepare the kettle to boil water. Moments later, Steve woke up and sat down with a glass of warm water. Steve said that he remembered Diana speaking in Greek. Diana agreed, and Steve asked if they were confused about whether they were in Greece. Diana responded that she hoped so. Steve again asked where they were, but Diana only replied that they were at her house and her mother. Steve continued to pursue and ask where her house was, so Diana admitted that he was in the underworld. Steve was immediately shocked and asked if she meant he was in hell. Then Diana said yes. Here Steve was shocked and asked if he was dead. At that moment, Diana and Circe answered simultaneously that Steve was not dead, and Diana again reminded Steve to rest because he had experienced a lot and told him to process the information Diana had just given. Steve looked down and held his head. Afterwards, Diana and Circe sit at the dining table as Diana watches Steve, who is still silent. Circe told Diana to give his time, and Diana asked why Steve was in this place, but Circe replied that she didn't know either. Diana continued her question by asking if this was a test, a trap, or a gift. Circe was only silent while looking at Diana, who was pensive. Not long after, Steve approached the two of them and shook hands with Circe to apologize for his actions and thank her for her and Diana's help. He also introduced himself as Steve Trevor from the United States Air Force. Cersei also introduced herself as Cersei and her daughter Diana to Steve, saying that Steve was lucky to be on Wild Isle, which was a safe part of hell because of Cersei and Diana. Steve agreed with this statement. After that, Steve asked Diana to show him where to find Steve to investigate the place, and Diana agreed. On the beach, Steve throws a stone towards the center of the sea, but Diana warns that he shouldn't do it because it looks like Hydra is still around. Steve is confused about what Diana means. Diana explains that in the middle, there is the tip of a Hydra tentacle that appears to be going into the sea, but Steve can't see it. Diana then apologized for forgetting that her eyesight was quite good, but Steve felt that his eyesight was also quite good because he was a pilot. Then he looked at Diana's eyes and said that her eyes were extraordinary. They continued walking. Then Steve commented that Diana was quite tall. Diana replied that Steve was also as tall as her. Here, Steve explained that she was quite tall in his world and almost no woman was as tall as her. Diana asked if this was a problem, but Steve said that it wasn't, and Diana asked about his world besides his height. But Steve explained that he couldn't tell her about it now because he felt that he wouldn't be able to go back there again. Afterward, Steve sat on the beach and continued to explain that he never thought he'd end up in hell. But Diana joined him and sarcastically responded that no one expected that. Steve just thinks he's a good person, but according to Diana, not everyone in hell deserves to be here. Sometimes they just end up in this place. Steve also thanked Diana for saving him twice, and Diana said yes. At this moment, in Gateway City, Steve and Diana are seen hugging. Diana then says that she was hoping to meet Steve, but she didn't expect it to be this soon. Steve asked what Diana was doing here, and Diana replied that she was saving people here. Behind Diana, Pegasus had just landed. Diana then complimented Steve, who looked handsome in his costume. But Steve explained that this was his uniform. He added that Commander Cole wanted to meet her. Diana agreed and asked Steve to take her there. Steve walks over to tell her about the man she's meeting, but Diana admits that she doesn't need to explain because she's not naive and understands the world of men from Cersei's teachings. Diana understands that they may be grateful for her help, but there must be some who are unhappy with her help, but she can handle such contradictions. Sure enough, Commander Cole doesn't like Diana endangering others by not asking permission from the military before acting. And he also accuses her of being in cahoots with the monster. Otherwise, how could she show up at the right time and help them? Diana replies that she understands that Commander Cole considers her an outsider that he can't control, and it frustrates him. But it's none of Diana's business. Diana's only concern is this monster, and she's just a woman alone, so she's willing to coordinate with Cole to solve this together because their world can't fight this monster without her help. But Diana isn't willing to be put in the military. Cole was about to scold her for denying it, but Diana didn't seem to care and instead approached a map displayed on the table and asked about the evacuation status. A man with glasses replied that they intended to stop it because Diana managed to finish the monster, but according to Diana, the Harbinger was just a messenger for the arrival of other monsters. Cole finally asked if this monster was bigger, and Diana said yes. Then the man with glasses also asked if she knew what monster it was and when this would happen. Diana replies that it could be any monster, but it's probably coming within the hour. Cole questioned if she was sure, and Diana commented that it was the best possibility for them. Hearing this, Cole immediately ordered to call Graham and told Jacoby to contact the chief of police and the commissioner to evacuate within 40 minutes. He also looked at Diana and threatened to report her to a court-martial if she didn't want to cooperate with them. Steve looked like he was going to protest, but Cole again said that Steve could also be included in the court-martial with Diana. Seeing Cole's treatment, Diana finally emphasized that Cole was the one who needed her and not the other way around, so she wanted Cole to rethink his way of talking to Diana while she would feed her horse. One of the soldiers asks what a dead horse eats, and Diana replies that it eats magic. Outside, Diana feeds Pegasus while talking to it. Diana tells Pegasus that defeating Harbinger, who is just a messenger, won't stop whatever is coming later. Then Steve comes out and sees Diana talking to Pegasus. He asks if Diana understands her horse, and Diana explains that she can talk to all animals. As soon as he saw Pegasus, Steve asked Diana for permission to pet Pegasus's head, and Diana gave him permission. Steve finally petted Pegasus and asked what its name was, to which Diana replied that this was Pegasus. Steve replied that he knew this was a Pegasus, but he wanted to know its name. Diana explained that this was indeed the mythological animal Pegasus, who was born from Medusa's blood and died after being killed by Zeus. Steve also realizes that's why it's made of bones, but according to Diana, it's not just bones, but he looks like this because he was killed. Steve wonders if that means Pegasus is still alive, and Diana explains that he lives by magic and sacrifice, just like Steve. Finally, Steve apologizes for what happened in there. Diana understands. Steve asks what Diana will do if they don't let her help, but Diana doesn't seem worried because they will be forced to need her help and the help of others. Steve asked what she meant by the others, to which Diana replied simply, "Heroes." Suddenly, Pegasus lifted his leg and looked agitated. Diana also suddenly covered her ears, but Steve heard nothing and was surprised. Here Diana tells Steve to close his ears, and finally Steve also hears the sound that makes him close his ears, and Diana says that this will end, but what comes after is what they should worry about. Diana seems to have unplugged her ears and sees something in the ocean. She prays for her mother's protection, guidance from the goddesses, and says if she can't meet her sisters in the Amazon this time, then she will meet them in the next life. It turned out that what she saw was tetracide, which no one survived after seeing it. Then Steve also looked at the giant creature in front of him and asked Diana what it was. Then Diana replied that it was a form of death. She then told Cole, who was behind her, to evacuate the citizens of one city while she would buy time for him. Cole protested because she had told him to evacuate within a mile radius, but Diana only replied that she was wrong. A moment later, Diana walks towards the ocean while asking for protection from the goddesses, because she thinks tetracide always destroys everything without a trace. Currently, in Gateway City, at the Natural History Museum. Inside the museum, people are looking at the TV showing Diana approaching tetracide. Alan explains that he doesn't know what Diana said to tetracide and wonders if the lasso won't work this time. One of the men watching the TV asked where Barbara was because she had to see this. Then a woman with glasses and curly hair replied that she was here. It turned out to be Barbara, she mumbled, and said the name Wonder Woman, after which she ran out of the museum. At the Gateway City Broadwalk, Diana seemed to fly away from tetracide and re-entered the Kraken bar. Then one of the soldiers asked what she was doing earlier, and Diana replied that she used magic to slow down tetracide's movements because he didn't like magic. Actually, her mother was even better at casting spells, but they had to settle for Diana. Diana then explains how tetracide kills, so that they have a chance to fight if Diana is dead. The name tetracide means killer of four things, namely, he kills fear, mind, body, and soul. At first, tetracide will kill their fear of the creature, then he will make a sound that can be heard miles away and make them come closer to tetracide and enter his mouth, until they experience the death of mind, body, and soul. Even those who have died in tetracide's stomach are luckier than those who experience the death of these three things in his mouth. For those who survive the sound of tetracide, then holding tetracide will also kill their minds so that they cannot fight back, and death of the body follows. When tetracide swallows them, then death of the soul will occur. Diana left the bar after reminding them to leave immediately. At that time, Steve chased her, but Diana only asked Steve to help these people leave, because when the sound started, Diana would not be able to help. Once on the coast, Diana told the Pegasus behind her to stay away. She allowed it to attack with hellfire when possible, but other than that, she told it to stay away from tetracide. Pegasus looked scowling, and Diana explained that with just one tetracide tentacle, Pegasus could die, and she was sure Zeus would not allow him to be resurrected a second time. Diana then flew towards tetracide with Nemesis and the Sword of Athena. She said that she had no ill intentions towards tetracide and only wanted to protect people in this place. So she offered the same thing as Harbinger, which was to leave or die at her hands. Tetracide made noises, and Diana understood that tetracide would not surrender, so she threw Athena's sword at tetracide with its base tied to Nemesis. Athena's sword stuck, to Tetraside's head, after which Diana flew wrapped Nemesis around Tetraside's body while asking for speed and victory from the goddess Nike, while Pegasus sprayed his hellfire at Tetraside. But Tetraside then used his tentacles to pull out Athena's sword and threw it into the middle of the sea, so Diana returned to casting spells and took a weapon in the form of a long double axe from her small bag. A moment later, Tetraside's tentacles moved quickly to attack Diana, but she used her double axe to cut off the tip of the tentacle. But while still cutting Tetraside's tentacles, her right hand began to be wrapped around Tetraside's tentacles. Earlier on the Wild Isle, Diana appears to be struggling with Hydra, which is now wrapping its tentacles around her. She then tells Steve, who is holding the double axe, to attack now. Steve ran towards Hydra and stuck the double axe into Hydra's body and then ran away according to Diana's direction. Diana also returned to face Hydra by stepping on one head and opening his other mouth with her hand. She talked to Hydra that this all happened because Hydra only respects the strong. After that, she opened Hydra's mouth wide and told him to let Steve go or they would not be able to live in peace. Not long after, Steve and Diana sat by a campfire. There, Steve asked if Hydra could understand her words. But Diana also didn't know because she thought Hydra must know about the difference in their strength. But she didn't expect Hydra to get to this point because it seemed to like Steve quite a bit. But Steve responded that he didn't have the same feelings. Steve feels that all there is in hell is traps, pain, and struggle. But Diana and Circe can still build their paradise here. Diana simply replied that love is transformative, and Steve argued that the world up there needed the same thing, especially since Diana understood love and wasn't a Hydra baby. Diana asks if he misses his world, and when Steve says yes, Diana asked him to tell her about the place where he came from. Finally, Steve tells her about Gateway City on the coast and across the sunset of the Pacific Ocean. Somehow this reminds him of his mother's smile. He misses that moment, making him remember his mother. Moments later at home, Diana looks surprised as she read the magic book and hurriedly closed it. She then asked Steve to get some firewood from the pile outside, and he agreed. As Steve left, Diana pointed out a spell in the book that could return Steve to his world. But while reading the book, Circe felt it wasn't the right spell, pointing out the part of the book that explained the great sacrifice that had to be made. Just then, Steve enters and jokes that he wants to get out of the cave himself, to which Diana replies that maybe one day he can. Later that night, Circe awoke to find Diana sitting in front of the fireplace with her coat and hood over her body. Circe asked what Diana was doing, and Diana replied that she couldn't stop thinking about it. Circe asked Diana again what she meant, and she explained that she kept thinking about what she would become. Because if Circe's words were true, that she was destined to be a hero, then she would be helping people, so she couldn't fail her first mission. Circe is confused about what mission she's referring to, and Diana explains that it's a mission to return the world's heroes to them, because with just one hero, the world can be saved. Diana was convinced that Steve was not a gift, but a test for her, but Circe felt they couldn't be sure about that. But Diana continued to say that if she really was a great hero, then the dominant hand of a great hero was a sufficient sacrifice to return Steve. Afterward, Diana opened the flap of her coat and saw that her right hand that she had cut off was already there. Circe cries over Diana's hand and asks why she did this, but Diana says it was something she needed to do. They then embraced. Afterwards, Diana and Circe build a bonfire by the sea and recite a spell together until the fire turns green, while in the distance, Steve can be seen, who, with the recitation of the spell, gradually begins to disappear and return to Gateway City. Now, in Gateway City. Diana's right hand is still in the Tetraside tentacles. Then Diana recites a spell so that her hand disappears and she falls from a height, but she easily flies back with her double axe to the Kraken bar where the soldiers are. Seeing Diana's broken hand, Jacoby asked if she was okay, and Diana explained that she had lost her hand a long time ago, and in its place was a magic hand made by her mother with Diana. So her hand could come back again, but she had to read a complicated spell first. Diana then took an iron hand from her small bag and reminded Jacoby to evacuate his person as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Steve, who saw Diana attach the iron hand to the base of her arm, said that the way Diana returned him was by sacrificing the arm of a hero. But according to Diana, her arm was the arm of a knight. Diana also used her iron hand to hold Steve's cheek and said that this was a worthy sacrifice. She then returned to tell the soldiers to leave here because she had felt the vibrations from the sound of tetricide in the sea earlier. Steve said that he didn't want to leave Diana alone here, but Diana didn't want Steve to die in vain on the beach after he was saved in hell. Not long after Diana left the bar, but she was accidentally hit by Barbara, who was running, Diana held Barbara, who was about to fall, and told her to take refuge in the bar and look for Steve Trevor, then called Diana's name and asked him to save Barbara. Diana left, but Barbara called her Wonder Woman. Barbara explained that in the Amazon, the strongest of them were called Wonder Woman. Diana turned around and asked if she knew about the Amazon. Then Barbara explained that the research material for her dissertation was about the Amazon myth. But then the sound of tetricide was heard, and Diana rushed back to the beach. Barbara's voice was heard introducing herself as Barbara Minerva, and Diana said her name while flying towards the beach. Barbara added that she was in the book, but Diana didn't quite understand what that meant, but she said that she would find out. Back in front of tetricide, Diana felt that this was a waste, because if she destroyed tetricide and died from it, then humans would flock to tetricide when he made his voice. But she needed something strong, because her magic could not penetrate his hard skin. Then Diana took out a green ball that might be a way out, but according to Diana, its range had to be expanded 1,000 times. After that, Diana approached Alan, who was still explaining that the military was trying to evacuate the city. Diana told Alan that she needed Alan's help, then they went up to the top floor of a building, and Diana was seen drawing circles and symbols with pink powder, but she forbade Alan to record it. Alan asks why not, and Diana explains that people are often afraid of new things, and people who are afraid can't help anyone. Besides, magic is something sacred, and not everyone has the responsibility to use it. After that, Diana read the spell in the circle picture, and then told the citizens through the news broadcast that this monster was too strong, and they had not left this city. While after this, tetricide would make a sound that would make them sacrifice themselves to it. So Diana will temporarily deafen the town, otherwise. After this, they will become believers in tetricide because they heard his voice. So she asks the citizens to help the people around them, and then the safety of the city is in their hands. Diana also mentioned that Wonder Woman believed in them. After that, she asked Alan to play her words over and over again instead of recording tetricide, which would make the citizens panic and fear. Then Diana broke the green ball, and green smoke soared into the sky and enveloped the entire city. Currently in Gateway City. In a house, a TV broadcast shows Diana saying that Wonder Woman believes in all of them. In the house, a woman named Etta writes a message to her sister Gia, telling her to stay home and watch the news while she goes out to help. Gia tries to stop her sister from leaving by pulling her away since both their ears are deaf from Diana's spell, but Etta heads for the door to get out. They ended up hugging and Etta opened the door, but to their surprise, they both saw Steve and Diana on their doorstep. Steve asked for permission to enter the house, and to Etta's astonishment, realized that Steve had come with Wonder Woman. At this moment, Gia panicked because she could hear all of their voices, which meant she would hear the sound of death, but Wonder Woman explained that she put a protection spell on this place so that they could communicate. Steve also introduced Etta Candy and Gia Candy to Diana, who had saved him when he was on the Wild Isle in Hell. Etta asked why they were here. Steve then explained that Diana asked him if he knew a witch, and Steve brought her here. Hearing this, Gia realized that what Steve meant as a witch was her, but Diana calmed her down by explaining that all she needed was a few ingredients. Diana explains that using a spell that makes deafness makes her stock of materials depleted, while she needs her arm. Because even though the prosthetic arm was forged by Hephaestus himself, she still needs her arm back. Gia only commented that having an arm was better. Meanwhile, Etta looks at Diana and asks if Steve remembers her making fun of him, because there's no way Diana looks the way he does, and Steve agrees. Etta confirms that Diana is better than that, and Steve wins by a lot, which Steve confirms. On the other hand, Gia isn't sure she has Prometheus's skin, but Diana mentions the ingredients she needs, and it turns out they're pretty easy to find there, like black walnut, yucca root, witch's burr, althea root, vervain, and valerian. Gia took all the ingredients Diana needed from the drawer behind the counter. She also questioned about the use of valerian at this time, but according to Diana, there were many matches in the use of this ingredient. Afterwards, Diana held Gia's hand and stated that the next ingredient would be rarer, but indispensable. She mentioned hemlock, morning glory, and datura. Gia then moved a pot that was covering a small safe, after which she used a plastic glove to pull out the tray that held the materials. Diana thanked Gia, and she asked if there was any other place she could use, as there would be a lot of blood that would contaminate the place for her next ritual. Afterwards, Etta, Gia, and Steve, who had used a bandage on his arm to draw blood, gathered in front of the curtain. They peeked at Diana, who was undergoing a ritual. Etta asked if Steve's suggestion that they donate blood for this ritual was an instinct or something else. And Steve apologized to Etta. Gia reminded Etta that Steve had to hit her before Etta would donate, so Steve told them all to be quiet. Behind the curtain, Diana was sitting in a circle of red powder with her face covered in blood and facing a small fire. She then made her plea to Hecate. "Hecate, hear me. Daughter of your beloved Circe calls on you in fire and blood. Lend me once again your great power in order to do great justice." After which, she recited a spell. Not long after, a bolt of lightning struck Diana, who was still concentrating on reciting the spell, earlier on the Wild Isle in Hell. Circe was seen running out of her cave and vomiting in front of the cave mouth. Just then, Hecate's voice was heard confidently, saying that the vision had begun. Circe knelt down and asked if she had done this, and Hecate confirmed it, as she was her most loyal follower. But Circe replied that if she was indeed her most devoted follower, Hecate shouldn't have put her in hell and kept her in such a low position, even forcing her to care for a child that wasn't hers. According to Hecate, there's a big game where they play their respective roles and sacrifices must be made. The arc of the universe is long and should favor justice. But that is not the case. Most justice had died in the process, and this time they created new possibilities, which had sacrificed mind, body, and heart. And indeed, Hecate gave this task to Circe. But she knew only Circe could raise the hero they needed, whose love would change Circe so that she would fight Hecate to protect the girl. Circe denied this, but Hecate confidently stated that Circe would do it, and this is what made her sure that this was the right decision for the world, for Diana and for Circe. She told Circe to lift her head and look at Hecate to know that she was blessed and would be remembered for her service. And then Hecate was seen with her 6 hands hovering over Circe. Afterwards, Circe returned to her bed, where Diana, who had woken up, said that she had a bad dream. Circe said the same thing. Then Diana asked what Circe had dreamt, and she replied that she had dreamt about the future. From that moment on, Circe began to see Diana's future, about her sacrifice and perseverance, and how Circe would be lonely here without her. So Circe began to make a lasso for Diana. This lasso would have Diana's transformative love and Circe's imprisoning love. At this moment, in Gateway City. Diana's right hand reappears with the diagram on it. She thanks Goddess Hecate in Greek, then kowtows and exits the curtained room, thanking and remembering them all. Etta reminded her to wipe the blood off her face, and while still wiping her face, Diana saw the message Etta had written to Gia before going out. She asked if Etta had intended to go help before they arrived, and Etta confirmed. Diana then asks if Etta works in a field that protects people, and Etta explains that she used to work as a detective in Gateway City, and now she is a private investigator, while Diana said that she was now working for herself in the same field as before. Etta thought that Diana knew how to talk. According to her, the way Diana said it was hopeful. After a while, Diana left while explaining that the protection spell in this house would disappear before the sound of death subsided, but the sound would soon disappear, and the death spell would follow afterwards. She looked ahead as she said that she hoped to see them again, but in front of her, there were fires in the buildings caused by Tetricide. Apparently because no one approached when she made the sound of death, Tetricide moved to look for humans, and Diana couldn't let it. Diana then flew under Tetricide, who was already between the buildings, and by looking at the position of his tentacles, Diana knew that the sound of death would stop, and she felt that the spell was slowly disappearing. Diana flew to the center of the ocean and tied her lasso, after which she cast a spell that made Athena's sword rise to the surface of the sea. Diana caught it and said that she had a plan for it, but before that, she needed to get Tetricide away from the city, so she took out a ball of red liquid. She whispered for it to be what Tetricide wanted, then threw it under the bridge, and there were screams of people in pain. It turned out to be the voices of the victims of Tetricide that would have happened if all Diana's efforts had not succeeded. Diana covered her ears because she could not hear the screams of the people, and the sound proved effective in inviting Tetricide back to the middle of the ocean. After Tetricide returned to the ocean, Diana held Athena's sword and recited a spell that could enlarge Athena's sword. According to her, what makes an attack successful is choosing the right weapon. Diana flew with Athena's enlarged sword while inviting Pegasus, and when she arrived above Tetricide, Diana thrust the sword into Tetricide's mouth with the help of Pegasus, who fired hellfire at Tetricide. Diana also begged the goddess Athena so that her sword could cut Tetricide like a wave cutting through rocks. She continued to pray to be given the help of strength and determination from goddess Athena. As a result, the sword managed to cut Tetricide's body into 2 parts. This incident was broadcast live by the Gate News broadcast and seen by the President of the United States in the White House. Seeing this, the president questioned where Commander Cole was at this time. Then a man with glasses replied that Cole was evacuating the citizens and they had not heard from him, since the citizens of the city became deaf. After that, the president called Cale, who was a national security advisor, and told her to give her advice. Cale explained that even though Diana had managed to kill the monster, they still had a very big problem ahead of them. Current situation in Gateway City. As soon as Tetricide's body was split in 2, Diana summoned the flying Athena sword back into her hand, but suddenly 2 fighter planes fired 4 missiles. One of them had already hit Tetricide, while the other 3 were knocked away by Tetricide's tentacles, which were not yet dead. Unfortunately, these 3 missiles were moving towards populated areas, so Diana used a spell and released 3 fireballs to block the movement of the missiles. 2 of the missiles had managed to divert their direction, but 1 missile was still heading towards the skyscraper, and Diana had no time to stop it. Fortunately, Pegasus used his hellfire to detonate the missile. Diana thanked Hecate and Pegasus. She then approached the fighter to warn them not to do that, and the pilot agreed. After that, Diana flew back above Tetricide, who began to reunite themselves. It seemed that Diana's attack was just to buy time. It was seen that Diana began to take a green lasso from inside her small bag. Previously, on the Wild Isle Hell, Diana and Circe sit in front of a bonfire on the beach. Circe is seen holding a green lasso. She says that this is a last resort, but Diana will need more weapons like this later. Hearing this, Diana asked her mother to describe her future more positively, and Circe apologized because Diana's future was not negative, but magnificent. Circe handed her the green lasso in her hand as she told her that her future would be full of beauty and fear. There would be danger, but also opportunity. At which point Diana would need a lasso that she called Sacrifice. According to Circe, this lasso will be able to bind all things and change them, but the transformation will depend on what is bound itself. Diana looked at the green lasso and said that she understood. A moment later, Circe is seen waiting in front of the campfire while Diana fights with the harpy in the sea. Diana is seen using her double axe to block the harpy's attack, but the harpy manages to grab Diana's hair. Finally, Diana took the green lasso around her waist. Then she wrapped the lasso around her hand and used it to choke the harpy's neck. But what Diana saw shocked her. Once finished with her fight against the harpy, Diana returned to Circe at the campfire. Circe asked how the fight had gone, but Diana was evasive and instead said that Circe shouldn't have waited for her. Circe presses Diana until Diana tells her that everything went well, and she admits that Circe is more skilled at transmogrification, while she is not very fluent. Circe asks her to speak more simply, and Diana finally explains that this is too cruel for her. Hearing this, Circe stood up and said that not everyone Diana met would accept Diana's friendship. Some might try to kill her, and this sacrifice lasso was made for that. In fact, it seems that the harpy almost killed her, even though she was carrying the sacrificial lasso. So she thinks Diana should thank the lasso instead of cursing it. Then Circe left the place. Diana then burned a bone and said that Circe seemed unable to see the abomination that Diana was referring to or did not care. At the same time as the bone was burned, Hecate appeared in front of Diana, who replied that Diana's words were true. Diana was confused about which one Hecate thought was right, and she confirmed both, especially the second one. But Diana thought she was most afraid about the second option. Diana appears to hand over the lasso of sacrifice that Hecate picked up, saying that maybe Circe doesn't care because she can weigh things well. Diana asked if she didn't know about it herself, and Hecate, who wrapped the lasso around her neck, replied that her mother, who could see the future, made this weapon because she knew Diana needed it. Diana replies that her mother didn't know about the future and could only see part of it, which are two different things. Hecate, who was tugging on the sacrifice lasso in her hand, asked if Diana thought her mother was setting her up. But Diana denied it. She usually believed in her mother implicitly, not because she was wrong, but because Diana was too trusting. Hecate asked if she didn't trust her this time, to which Diana replied that this weapon made her feel like they weren't on the same page. Hecate throws the lasso back into Diana's hands as she calls her a foolish girl, to which Diana apologizes for speaking too presumptuously. Hecate finally says that the weapon is her mother. The lasso has the power of transmogrification because her mother's greatest power was in transformation, so she gave her best to Diana. And what made her believe in transformation was Diana. Even Diana could make Circe believe in it more than Hecate herself. Hearing this, Diana fell silent. After that, she went home and apologized to her mother, but her mother replied that there was nothing to forgive, but Diana still said that there was something to forgive. Diana knelt at her mother's feet and told her that Circe was the best witch, and that she taught her everything Diana knew like she was God to her. Circe was so important to her that Diana forgot that she didn't get what she got for free, but she fought for it on her own, like a stone chiseled in pain and fear. Circe lifted Diana's chin and added that it was Diana who taught her about love. Diana goes on to say that if she had her way of thinking, she would never have made a weapon like this. But her view is narrow, so she benefits from the views of others, and she was wrong to question her mother. Diana reveals that she needs Circe to teach her how to use this lasso. In Gateway City right now, Diana is hovering above Tetraside with the lasso of sacrifice while acknowledging that her mother was right. Perhaps this is the current state of Diana that her mother saw in the lookout pool. Next, Diana thought that she had to concentrate because her transformation form had to be correct, even though she wasn't sure if she could come back later. She recalled that Tetraside had no mortal enemies, but since she depended on sound, she had to decide what form was appropriate. Just then, Pegasus appeared near Tetraside, and Diana got inspired about what form it needed. Diana then descended into the sand and removed her armor, after which she wrapped a lasso around her hand, while saying that she would turn into a tragic and ugly person. She was a condemned and cursed person, forever living in the injustice of hell. And this cloak would be with her until she returned as Diana of the Wild Isle, Diana the last Amazon, and Diana the daughter of Circe. Diana opened her glowing green eyes while pulling the lasso that had been wrapped around her left hand. Then Diana's body turned into a large snake with hair in the shape of a small snake. After that, she said that she was now Medusa, and all who saw her eyes would not live. Meanwhile, Barbara, Steve, Etta, and Gia, who saw all this from the news broadcast on the laptop, were shocked, especially Steve, who asked what happened to Diana. Barbara explained that Diana had turned herself into Medusa, and Etta, who didn't understand, asked what Medusa was. Barbara answered that Medusa was a priestess of the goddess Athena who was raped by Poseidon in one of Athena's temples. Barbara continued to explain that because of her sin, she was cursed by Athena with this form. Gia commented that this was horrible, and Barbara replied that gods are vile, but history often doesn't match reality. Documents are dubious, and stories are often contradictory. However, Medusa's curse is not in her form, but anyone who looks into her eyes will be turned to stone. Sure enough, Tetraside opened his eyes, and in the eyeballs appeared small yellow-red eyes that showed Medusa's form in the eyes. Then Tetraside's body turned to stone. After that, Diana walked away, and Barbara, who saw the live broadcast, questioned why Diana remained Medusa, even though Tetricide was dead. Etta replied that maybe she couldn't remember who she really was, and hearing that Steve tore off his sleeve to use as a blindfold because he, as Diana's friend, would remind her who she really was. Etta disagreed with Steve's decision, but Steve insisted that since Diana had cut off her arm to get Steve out of hell, he would not leave Diana out there alone. Steve tied the blindfold on while Barbara thought this was the best decision for them, so Etta reluctantly agreed. Out there, Diana was seen moving through the city and rummaging around when Steve called Diana's name, and Diana stopped and faced him. Steve explained that Diana had previously helped him in the underworld, cutting off her arm to send him home. Hearing this, Diana tried to cover her ears, but Steve kept going while removing his blindfold and reminding her that she was Diana, a witch from the Wild Isle and the daughter of Circe, the last Amazon and Wonder Woman who became a hero for Gateway City. Finally, Diana transforms back from her Medusa form into herself, hugging Steve and thanking him. They both then looked at Tetricide, who had become stone. Steve asked if this was over. Diana replied that it was almost over and only one step away. Then Diana knocked down Tetricide, who had become a stone, until it melted. She also thanked Hera for her help. While bowing, she also thanked Hecate for showing her the way, Artemis for his hunting skills, Hestia for her faith, Aphrodite for her love, Demeter as a mother to everything, and Athena, who helped her through her abomination to Medusa. Diana hopes to learn from this. Steve calls Diana from a distance. Gia also asks if this is really the end, and Diana, who is wearing her armor again, agrees. Barbara was curious how Diana knew that this would work, and Diana, who fed Pegasus with magic, replied that she didn't know either, but Medusa was a terrible story. She suffered a terrible fate at the hands of Athena, whom Diana loved and blessed. So when she felt the injustice of Medusa's fate, she realized that even goddesses can be weak when their hearts are filled with hatred. Hate and fear make them the worst version of themselves, and they need to be better than that. Steve asked if Diana was leaving, but Diana said that she had a lot to do, so she wasn't going anywhere. Suddenly, the ground beneath Diana's feet cracked and a large hand pulled Diana down to the ground. Steve frantically called out to Diana, but after they took a long look into the hole, only Etta finally commented by swearing. And that's the story of The Last Amazon. Not a tale about triumph, but about survival after everything has already been lost. This version of Wonder Woman isn't born from hope or prophecy. She's shaped by absence, by manipulation, and by a childhood stolen from the Amazons who were supposed to raise her. Within the absolute universe, this changes everything. Wonder Woman is no longer the heart of the Trinity. She's a warning, a reminder of what happens when gods fail, systems collapse, and heroes are created too late. Because when a hero is raised in darkness, she doesn't fight to save the world. She forces the world to face what it's become. This is Panelix, and this is DC rewriting Wonder Woman's origin into its darkest form.